Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I'm a little bit late. I didn't want to start when my wife left at 3 o'clock on the dot. The dogs flips out. They're losing their shit. Nevertheless, let's do the stream. I'm not blaming it on my wife. It's still me, but kind of hurt a little bit more so at the end. The Russian Revolution. Viewer's choice. Let me check to make sure. All right. So let me kill this. Always check your sound. Disable this. Also, there were a few things. I started looking and saying, do I want to present this to my audience in a different way? And I started thinking of how do I want to present this to my audience? And all of those things ended up kind of pushing the show. I got to be honest. I started thinking about this from the standpoint of what does a viewer choice show look like? And I got to be honest, I'm not quite sure what that is. So my thought is I want to discuss the Russian Revolution from the context of politics, because this is, for all intents and purposes, a political show. And I want to discuss the revolution, yes, from the standpoint of politics, but how that politics relates to us. Meaning living history. Meaning the only way I could really think about talking about this, at least in a way that I guess this show would do it, or the way this show would do it in a way that makes sense for the show, would be from the standpoint of politics and living memory politics. This is why this took place. This is what's taking place now. And what are the parallels? Because the part I love about this the most are the parallels between those two things. I don't know if people are okay with me giving their names, which is why I'm not giving names of people who gave what. One of my patrons was very clear that they didn't want me using their names. I don't know if that applies to everybody, so I'm going to not use the names. And what I am going to say, yes, I will be there in a couple of hours. What I will say is, this is one of the things that people put up for the viewer choice. Now the thing is, my wife turns out she's like, "Hey, you're just doing one," and I was like, "What do you mean? Am I just doing one?" She says, "Well, I thought you might do multiple choices." Now I don't mind doing multiples if it's one of those things where at the end of one we start talking about one of the other ones. Oh, thank you, John Lackerman. I appreciate it. And so this is, I think in my head, this was different than what my wife had in mind. I had in mind of, there's certain things that the people wanted to talk about, and all of us kind of just had this free form talking about a particular issue. Meaning it wasn't necessarily me presenting anything. It was me, for the most part, talking with my audience about a particular topic. But yeah, Data Lord Terror. Yeah, this is that exactly. This is also so I think I'm going to probably do it in a quasi way. This is going to be locked away purely for the patrons themselves. So even though everybody can see it now, after this is over with, it is going to be uploaded to Patreon, and it's just going to be for the patrons. So that said, let's talk about the Russian Revolution in the context of now. But, you know, in order to give context of now, you have to look back to then. So, I'm going to show a video that, God, I hope, doesn't get me blocked again. But I just want to show a very small part of this. I'm going to show part of this because this gets across. This gives me a framing of the way I want to have the conversation. When we look at history, I'm saying this in this epic way. I'm not a history teacher at all. When we look at history, we look at history in this way of this shit that took place back then. I think about the way lefties talk about FDR. Oh, the FDR era. You know, it's this venerable man who fought in a war, fought these wars and did all these social programs. We say the same thing about LBJ to a certain degree. I mean, mind you, we say it more so for the progressive civil rights legislation. But we look at this stuff as if it's a time crystal, a time capsule. This stuff took place in time back in the old days, and for whatever reason, social forces allowed those things to take place. The great man theory. I don't buy into the great man theory. I buy into there were people who were pushed by social forces that would allow certain, let's say, movements within those forces. And they just so happened to be the figureheads for those changes. Let's bring in Lenin in this conversation. Why would a society collapse in such a way? Why? Why? And what does it mean for now? Oh, wow, look at this. I love this. And for whatever reason, I have 2 Vulcans. Why do I have a second Vulcan? That's awesome. Damn it. Why do I have a second Vulcan? I think I know why I have a second Vulcan. Thank you, by the way. Why do I have a second Vulcan? Elephants on Coke. Thank you, Elephants on Coke. Fuck yeah, you're doing the Russian Revolution. Dan Carlin has an excellent 6-part series on World War I. The part 6 touches the Russian Revolution and how they led up to the war. World at War has an amazing one. I would also suggest looking at some of the propaganda pieces, believe it or not, to get their take on it, to see their version of events in the way that they were looking at the world. This Pollyannish view of the world. It's amazing. But I've seen so many of these, in addition to Lenin's own book on this, The State and Revolution. I can't quote you chapter and verse. But that book itself, critique of Lenin, critique of Marx and all this stuff, it's fascinating. All this stuff, the stuff that's surrounding this is fascinating. Because lefties are always looking back in history about the revolution and everything else. What was the situation that led up to these guys doing this? And how does it apply to now? I find those to be the most interesting intersections. So let's take a look at this. Hopefully they don't kill my channel over this. But I want to play part of this. So let's flip this over. And maybe I just won't highlight the entirety of the screen. So forgive me that I'm not highlighting the entirety of the screen or expanding. I don't want to expand it fully because I don't want them to copyright strike this.
By 126 million people from 194 ethnic groups. It was a country in which workers and peasants lived in poverty and hardship, while Russia's elite, its imperial family and aristocracy, lived lives of gilded luxury. There was a long history of struggle in Russia against the injustices of the system. And in 1905, a revolution forced the Tsar to allow the creation of a State Duma, or National Assembly. But its power was limited, and the compromise pleased neither the Tsar nor the reformers. In 1914, this divided empire was plunged into fresh crisis by World War. World War I was a disaster for Tsarist Russia. At the front, the country suffered a series of devastating defeats, while at home there were food shortages and economic chaos. The Tsar was held responsible for the crisis. After all, he was now the army's commander-in-chief, and he was standing in the way of government reform. His German-born wife, Empress Alexandra, was even thought to be supporting Germany, while the entire family was said to have fallen under the spell of a Siberian mystic and faith healer, Grigory Rasputin. In December 1916,
let's add a little bit of context to all of that, because that's a lot that's taken place. So Rasputin was her kid was sick. So it sounds a little weird when you just hear it from the standpoint of a faith healer, and her this woman was under the spell of a faith healer and a German-born wife. All of these people were intermingled in marriage. Like the rulers of these different countries, all of these people were intermingled in marriage. They were shocked as shit that they were at war. They didn't believe this war was going to be a real war. And they didn't believe that this was going to be something that was unresolvable, because to some degree, all of them were intermingled in the way they went about their affairs. The catch to this is the countries that were the minor powers, like Serbia, Austria-Hungary, well, they had different ideas. More so, Austria-Hungary had different ideas in this situation because they wanted to use a certain military positioning to gain, to get this kind of, use Germany for a certain military positioning in this way, to try to edge out what they consider to be an up-and-coming rival power of Serbia. That has nothing to do with Russia at all. That has nothing to do with Britain. That has nothing to do with Germany. That has nothing to do with any of those other nations. They plunged into war over, for all intents and purposes, issues between minor powers. Now, that said, he did have a German wife. If you were looking at the couple and you were just buddies and friends with the couple, you were like, oh, that's such a sweet and pretty couple. They love each other so much. Like, I gotta be honest, I have a bias towards people who I think love each other. Like, when I think this guy loves that woman, I'm a little less harsh on a particular guy. Problem is, he was a plutocratic asshole who essentially was perfectly okay with having all for himself and yet wanting those people to fight his war. That country lived in desperate, desperate poverty. In the 1900s, 92% of the world was in poverty. Think about that. 92% of the world was in poverty. But they weren't too impoverished to have a world war. There's that. I guess my point to this is, Rasputin, in this particular situation, yes, he was a quote-unquote faith healer and all this other stuff. But this doesn't really go into why she was captivated by this. People don't get captivated by this stuff in a vacuum. Her kid was sick. Her kid was sick. God damn it, her kid was sick. And as somebody who has a mom who cares for a kid, or who has a mom who had a kid that was sick, i.e. me, I can tell you that when a mom's kid is sick, they're willing to go through lengths to make sure that kid is okay and do what they need to for that kid. This is 1915. Regular medicine, whatever you want to call regular medicine, had no answers for why her kid was sick, nor did it have answers to what to do to assist that kid. What did have answers was Rasputin. And those answers were utter nonsense. And yet those answers was enough to keep that mom's sane and intact. The doctors, your kid is going to die. Rasputin, be well. Your kid will be okay. Be calm. And she calms. And she calms. And in calming, the kid gets okay. Now, it's nothing that Rasputin did. Rasputin didn't have any powers. But whether Rasputin had any powers or not, it's a secondary thing. It doesn't matter whether he had powers or not. It matters what took place, meaning the kid didn't die, and what the mom thought, meaning, oh my God, this kid didn't die. It must be to some degree related to this person. It's fucking phenomenal. Also, Gilbert Felicio. I know that last name is not Felicio, and I'm sorry. But Feliciano. It's not that I'm saying state and capital word critique of Marx. I know I said it, and I said it a little bit too flagrantly. The words are being conflated. What I mean is, Lenin clearly didn't have this belief that a revolution was just going to happen. It was just going to magically happen. Capitalism was just going to fall apart, and a revolution was going to happen. He believed it needed to be pushed. I don't think I'm wrong on that point. Let's keep going.
Rasputin was murdered by Russian aristocrats, possibly with the help of British secret agents, both groups determined to end his influence over the Tsar. But in the eyes of many, the damage had already been done. On the 23rd of February 1917, thousands of women took to the streets of the Russian capital, Petrograd, to mark International Women's Day and protest over bread shortages. The next day, they were joined on the streets by workers and students carrying placards that read, "Down with the Tsar." Troops ordered to put down the disorder mutinied and joined the protesters instead. Tsarist officials were arrested. Prisons and police stations were attacked. Emblems of Tsarist rule smashed and burned.
Do you hear how it started? Women's March. It's a goddamn Women's March. Women rose up. We want bread, goddammit! And then other people were like, you know what? Those women got a point. We want bread too. In fact, we want a little bit more than bread. We want more than bread. This guy's sitting in a fucking mansion. And we're out here starving and fighting and dying. Why does this make sense? Oh, wait, it doesn't make sense. And the moment that one side started to say it doesn't make sense, and somebody else says, you know, they're right, it doesn't make sense. Somebody else says, you know what, they're right, it doesn't make sense. You get a little bit of group, and other people start to aggregate around that group and say, you know what? All of us are right. This doesn't make sense. All of us are right. It doesn't make sense. Now you have a large crowd of people saying, holy shit, this doesn't make sense. We're the majority. It doesn't make sense. We're the majority opinion. We were always the majority opinion. We were always the majority opinion. We just didn't know that. We just didn't know that. Correlate that to mainstream media today. Mainstream media puts out an opinion. And in that opinion, it says, we're the objective point of view. That's what it says. We're the objective point of view. Now, the catch to this is, you have a bunch of millionaires talking to another bunch of millionaires who talk to another bunch of millionaires. All of them talking to each other. You have a political class who these bunch of millionaires, talk to. All of them love the status quo. All of them love the way things are. Everyone thinks the world is great. And the thing that they think is the most important thing ever? Donald Trump in Russia. That's amazing, ain't it? Donald Trump in Russia. When you ask the rest of the population, they said that's 1%. Meaning, the thing that they talk about the most is the thing that the public cares about the least. There's a beauty in it. Because it creates a clear disparity between you've lost legitimacy. You've lost your legitimacy. Look at the Tsar in this case. The Tsar, 200 years of royalty that the Tsar ruled in. And in those 200 years of royalty, this is the way things are. I am appointed by God. How dare you say anything about my rule here? Yes, I need all of this luxury. Can't do without this fucking luxury. What do you think? How am I going to do without this mansion and palace and all of this other stuff? I'm sorry. Your disposition in life is the way your disposition is. But God damn it, I've earned this by being born as a Tsar. Well, that's not all that different than the perspective that's taken from the standpoint of our media and so forth. You have a political class, a governing class, if you want to call it that way, in the way George Bush says it. The rich believe they've completely earned this particular place, even though most of the stuff is just kind of inherited wealth. But the perspective here is profound in regards to the gap. Meaning the way he's looking at the world, all of these resources are being hoarded. And everybody else struggling. And then you have 95% of the wealth in our society given to the top 1%. And the rest struggling. It's fucking amazing. Now, the media looks at this particular situation and say the most important thing that we need to talk about here is not the wars. No, we don't need to bring that up. Not so much. We don't want to deal with the lead that's in the waters, in the people's thing. We don't want to deal with the homelessness that people are dealing with, the student loans that's crushing kids and is the boot on their backs. We don't want to do any of this stuff. Nope. That's not the thing that's important to us. The thing that's important to us is whether or not a spearfishing into John Podesta, leaking factually true information showing that the Clinton camp and the Democratic Party were cheating Bernie Sanders. That's what we need to talk about continuously and in perpetuity. They've lost legitimacy. The Tsar, at that point, has lost a certain amount of legitimacy. We don't give a shit if he's appointed by God. Our issue here has more to do with whether or not we're going to eat and whether our kids are going to eat. I love it. It's the same breaking of legitimacy now as then. And I want to nail that point home. The Russia thing is an amazing thing. When you look at the polls, people don't care. They don't care. Even if they grant you that it is true, they don't care. It is an impossible argument to make to people that a government that is at a CIA and an NSA that is at liberty anytime they wanted to peered into either allies or attacked other countries. It's a hard case to make. We've created fires around the world and then saying, hey, we need to spend $1 trillion putting out the fires that we've been creating. What about stop creating the fires? I guess my point is you've lost legitimacy from the standpoint of media. The thing that's supposed to give news and information has completely lost legitimacy in the eyes of the public, on the left and on the right. Let's keep going. I don't want to get too far off the point. Russian Revolution.
The government had lost control of the capital. The Tsar was told by his ministers that order could only be restored and Russia saved from military defeat if he gave up power. So, on the 2nd of March, Nicholas agreed to abdicate. In just 10 days, 300 years of Romanov rule had come to an end. The February Revolution had been remarkably swift and bloodless, and hopes were now high for the creation of a more democratic, more just Russian state. Members of the State Duma, the National Assembly, had formed a provisional government, which was to hold power until a constituent assembly was elected, to give Russia a new constitution. But in reality, the provisional government shared power with the Petrograd Soviet, a council elected by workers and soldiers.
Right here. I love this. I love this. It was a dual government of sorts. So, Petrograd Soviet, workers and military, and the provisional government, the Duma. Now, the wild part about this is these two, to some degree, had to have some level of interaction with one another. But if one side is workers and soldiers, it gives you a very clear idea on what the other side represented. Just saying. Let's keep going. I love this. I love this. What they represent gives you an idea on what they're going to do. Workers, soldiers, and then the vestiges of the previous regime, the Tsarist regime. Let's keep going.
That controlled the capital's troops, transport, and communications. The Petrograd Soviet, dominated by the Socialist Revolutionary Party and the Marxist Menshevik Party, was much more radical than the provisional government. Yet it supported the government's decision to continue the war and honor the commitments that Russia had made to the Allies. It was a fateful decision that ultimately played into the hands of one of the smaller parties, the Bolsheviks. Their leader, Vladimir Lenin, recently returned from 16 years in exile, bitterly opposed the imperialist war. He also demanded the immediate redistribution of land, from rich landowners to peasants, and the transfer of power from the bourgeois provisional government to the people's soviets or councils that were springing up across Russia. The Bolshevik program was summed up in a simple slogan: bread, peace, and land. And as Russia's economic and military crisis deepened, its appeal to the masses grew and grew.
You're in constant war. You're dirt poor. Like, not dirt poor in a way where you have a television, or dirt poor in a way where you have an internet and a phone. Not dirt poor in a way where you have, you still watching Game of Thrones. Like, dirt poor in a way where if I get a potato this week, thank you, Jesus. That level of dirt poor. And somebody who's sitting on his ass a long ways away, who's making God knows amounts of wealth, is saying, hey, I need you to go fight in a war against people who you've never met, who's never done anything to you, and who, for the most part, you would probably like under normal circumstances, seeing as you are most likely in the same circumstances. I need you to go fight a war. I need you to go kill and murder and potentially get killed and murdered on my behalf. And you should be happy with that. This is the context. This is the context that we're talking about this. Now, Lenin comes back and says, look, that guy has all of this wealth. You are doing all of the work. Why should he get all of the spoils from the stuff that he's been hoarding? I agree with Lenin. Why wouldn't I agree with Lenin? Brett, do you see the sign? I love this sign. I looked at the sign and thought, that's fucking inspirational. Now, it is not insane for people to be taken by this, because this would make perfect sense to the people who you're saying this to. If you are part of the top 1%, if you're part of the aristocracy, and somebody said this, you're like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. That seems pretty valid to me. I don't like that. Yeah, it makes sense for you not to like that, because that is somewhat opposed to the way that you've been going about your exploitive affairs. If you say that to the people being exploited by that particular system, it makes all the sense in the world that those people would be responsive to it. And those people were responsive to it. And seeing they were already in this kind of militaristic posture where they had been killing and murdering for the Tsar, you can imagine that killing and murdering starts to go for the other side. Hey, if I'm okay to kill and murder for one, why am I not okay to kill and murder for a better cause? Just saying. People aren't necessarily fucking insane for signing on to this. And in America, they don't get this history. This is not something that they get where they're like, I'm getting this from a standpoint of an unbiased standpoint where I can understand the perspective of the people in that situation as they went about their affairs. And it made more sense for the people in that situation. Now, here's a catch. There are caveats. This is not an industrial age. Like, we're not in a situation where there's mass thing. We're at the point right now where there were companies that were able to create like 1,000 t-shirts. A minute? Some ridiculous number of t-shirts. There is no situation where a person should go unclothed if you have the capacity to create t-shirts to that degree. Yeah, but this is not where we were. This is not where we were. So you're talking about a society that is dirt poor, and they're on this mission of trying to supply bread and everything else, and going with this idea of this kind of Marxist society and this kind of pre-industrial society. There were hiccups. And that's to put it mildly. Let's keep going.
Grew and grew.
Our tactics. Absolute distrust. Absolute distrust. No support for the provisional government, Lenin. Why not? Why didn't he want to support the provisional government? Think about that. Why not? Why would you not want to support the provisional government? Because the provisional government is still the vestige of the last society. They don't want to be in that last society. They want to be out of that last society, meaning they want somewhat of a socialist Marxist system. But here's the catch. If these fuckers who are vestiges of the last system, who are clinging to this kind of czarist rule, I mean, some of them are even talking about putting the czar back on the throne, why am I going to fucking work with these people? There's no way to work with these people. Our aims are in complete disalignment. Yes, some of us want, you know, more, or let's say more democratic system, but we don't want that. We want a different system. And if we want a different system, pretending as if our goals are in some level of alignment, nonsense. We are going to be in absolute and complete distrust of that government, and we want to make sure that other people are also distrustful of that government. If the name of the game is to make sure that the czar has no clothes, we want to make sure that the vestiges of the czar also has no clothes. That's what he did. I mean, after all, part of that revolution started because they were in that goddamn war, and that government voted to keep them in that war. People didn't get what they want. Lenin's strategy, let's not help them in fucking up.
In June, a new Russian military offensive ended in disaster, with 400,000 Russian casualties, massive desertions, and the collapse of army morale and discipline. In July, soldiers and sailors in Petrograd mutinied. They were joined in the streets by workers with Bolshevik support. But troops loyal to the provisional government opened fire on the protesters and dispersed the crowds. A police crackdown followed, leading to the arrest of several Bolshevik leaders, including Leon Trotsky, while Lenin, with the help of Joseph Stalin, fled to Finland, traveling with forged papers under the name of Konstantin Ivanov. A socialist and stirring orator named Alexander Kerensky became Russia's new prime minister and was hailed as the man who would save Russia from anarchy. The army's commander-in-chief, General Kornilov, believed Russia's war effort was being undermined by chaos at home and deliberately sabotaged by men like Lenin, whom he declared a German spy. So in August, he ordered his men to march on Petrograd to restore order.
Here's the thing. Lenin wasn't... It's complicated. It's complicated. So the wild part about this is, it kind of is. He is and he's not. Lenin is his own person. Lenin wanted to, you know, the socialist society, yes. But he was willing to use German help to do so. Germany, in this case, wanted Russia out of the war. Lenin wanted his country out of the war to some degree. And you can make an argument that Lenin just wanted power. And Lenin was willing to use whatever he could to get that power. Meaning, if he needed to make a deal, he was going to make a deal. But we don't necessarily know if he made a deal. That said, Germany threw Lenin into Russia like a bomb. That bomb being this kind of social destabilization. But Lenin wanted that social destabilization. So if he was willing to use German help to do so. That's the reality of it. Now, however you cut that is how you cut that. This is kind of what I mean when I say it's complicated. Yes, Germany wanted them out the war. But yes, Lenin wanted a socialist revolution in that country. Both things were true. They had aims that coincided with one another. And in those aims coinciding, that took place. Now, the catch became, or the rape became afterwards, when the peace being negotiated between Russia and Germany, where Germany said, I want a lot of land for you to get out of this war. And Russia quibbled about it, in which case Germany took the land. Not took, but Russia gave it up. This is kind of what I mean when I say it's complicated. Now, look at that through the lens of now. Through the lens of our media space. Is it possible that a spear phishing was done by Russia in order to get information about Hillary Clinton? It's possible, yeah. It's possible that the Russians were doing it. It's possible, yeah. I guess I say it's possible because in my mindset, this is what nation states do. Doesn't shock the shit out of me in the least. So, like, now, that said, for something like RT, for the people who are on a particular network, BBC is given a certain degree of information from a particular perspective. It's from the British perspective. British broadcasting. The BBC plays in all sorts of nations all across the world. I love the BBC when I'm abroad because it gives me my information. They call it objective, but objective to a particular perspective, a British perspective. Now, Voice of America, whatever these other networks they have from the standpoint of the United States, they do the same thing abroad, given a particular perspective. All nations do it. Now, for something like RT, when it's given its news, to act as if RT is somehow inherently different than the other networks is nonsense. It's nonsense. And if you're calling that propaganda and all this other stuff, it's something has had to happen in your society where it's been destabilized. And you need to find something to point to it, to try to explain why it's been destabilized. The fuckery that's taking place in Russia didn't take place in a vacuum. It took place because of the shit that was taking place in Russia. It was that czar having that much economic wealth with this kind of war and everything else creating complete chaos within the society itself. Germany, yeah, was able to throw Lenin back in, but only because of the chaos that was already there. I'm making the point that it's a thing of exploitation, not necessarily something that was being created. It was an exploitation. If you're trying to say that this chaos that's taking place in the United States, and you're trying to say environmentalism and all this other stuff is somehow attributable to Russia, that's nonsense. That stuff was already there. And the people who are in the society itself are trying to point to things outside of itself to explain why it's taking place. It wasn't the Germans that created this issue. It was the Tsar. This is the point that I'm trying to make. And in the same way, the Democrats are trying to say that it's the Russians. It wasn't the Russians. Status quo. Established order of things. Let's talk about this. So, I'm going to end this here because I don't want to play the whole thing and I don't want them to say that, oh, dude, you've played an entire video of somebody else. And so now we're going to take your channel down. I'm trying to avoid that. All right, so let's see. Who do we have? Who do we have? No, we're not glorifying it. I mean, look, it's nothing to glorify or to cry. It's like saying, do people glorify the American Revolution? Fucking genocide. I mean, are you shitting me? I don't understand this bias in this way. I don't get this bias. You have people who are under the brutal boot of a czar who is essentially taking magnificent advantage off of their labor and their work. Great. Are we supposed to glorify that status quo? Meaning just the violence of just standing still. Is that what we're supposed to do? But the violence that it takes to try to change and transform a society, even if they fuck up and get it wrong. But the violence to change it is somehow wrong. But the violence to keep it standing still is perfectly okay. That's a weird bias that we have in the way we look at our world and our affairs. It's not saying that what they ended up with was fucking awesome. It was not. It was not. But they tried. And people don't get it right every time they do stuff. Their intentions, in this case, were good. Their intentions were good. They just fucked up. And now, here's the other catch. It also doesn't necessarily mean that you try to go back to what other people tried and fucked up on. There's that too. Meaning it's both ways. It's both ways. Oh, by the way, I don't have Super Chat, guys. My channel has been demonetized. I forgot. I need to say that. If anybody wants to give, there's an alternative method right here in the, you can click the link in the description box. It'll take you to the Super Chat alternative that gives to PayPal. There will be a little Star Trek character that pops up and dances and so forth in the corner of the channel. So there's that. But no, we're not glorifying it. Do people in Russia really believe climate science is a hoax only to damage their economy? I don't know. I don't know. Jamal, when I get paid, I'm becoming a patron. Sorry for your channel. Aw, thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate it. Demonetized. What the fuck? Fuck Google. Yeah, they've demonetized the entirety of this channel. They say that I was showing vids. Now, they said duplicating vids. They said I was duplicating vids. Duplication has a particular name for it. I may show clips like other channel. All channels show clips of news shows and so forth. I don't have any copyright strikes. I don't have any of that stuff. I follow community standards. And yeah, they sent a terse letter saying that we're taking it down. Yeah, he likes Hillary. He's a Russia scaremonger. He's okay with her attacking countries, but, you know. Oh, dude. Well, Brahm, congratulations on your new job. And, you know, it always fucks with me to say stuff like this. And I don't say it. I say it because it's, you know, it's funny. I bring it up. It's almost like I'm forced to bring it up just because I need to explain what that little, what the thing is. Click the link in the description box for Super Chat alternative. I don't bring it up because I don't bring it up because of that. I bring it up because I'm annoyed as fuck at YouTube for doing it. And it's like, you sign on kind of almost as a business thing, and you say, okay, I'm going to try to make this work as a business. And it's like, motherfucker. Totalitarian government. But yeah, Brahm, congratulations. Would you ever name your dog Hillary? No, I would never name my dog Hillary. That's funny though. That is funny. That is funny. Look, I started this on the Russian Revolution, but we can talk about anything. I always open this up. Start holding Super Chat Saturdays. Oh, that's funny. That's interesting. I don't like to be that hard on the Super Chat stuff. I like to let's say it this way. I am more into this thing of people giving because they want to give, not because they're pushed to give, even if that's me giving a push. I know me giving the thing in the beginning and the end is a push, but that's a mild, you know, push. Having Super Chat Saturdays is too over the top. It freaks me out. It freaks with me, fucks with me. Oh, Hillary shit on the rug. That's wrong. That's so wrong. That's so wrong. That was a joke. Oh, about Jimmy. Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. He does do that. I mean, look, I imagine that he's trying to run a show. He's trying to run a business. Jamal Thomas, back to the 70s if you have the Soviet Union. Right. If you live in the Soviet Union, would you have no rights? No. This is not me glorifying the Soviet Union. Don't misunderstand me. Like, stop the fucking binary thinking. Like, and I don't blame people for it. It's hard to do. It's like Pepsi, Coke. Pepsi is the fucking devil. I love Coke. No. Like, let's be specific for the moment. Do you believe that people who were living in shit and piss were pissed off for living in shit and piss if there was somebody else who's hoarding a lot of resources? Yes. Start there. Put a check mark on that. People shit and piss, living in shit and piss, angry for living in shit and piss. All right, fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. Nobody likes to live in shit and piss. You have a kid. I don't want that kid to live in bad, dire straits. I have a dog. I don't want my dog living in dire straits. So you can imagine how I would feel about other people living in bad places. Somebody comes up and says, look, that fucking guy's living in a mansion and you're living in shit and piss. Is it fair that you are living in shit and piss and he's living in a mansion? Is it fair? And you say, well, I'm living in shit and piss and I don't like living in shit and piss. So yes, what you're telling me is absolutely right. You've hooked me in on something based on something that's logically true. Factually, logically true. In this kind of grounded, human, flat fact way. It is perfectly unfair for that person who is no better than I am to live high on the hog while I am living in shit and piss. They're not wrong for being hooked into what Lenin is saying. They're perfectly, absolutely right. In a perfectly humanistic way, they're right. All of this is in the context of a fucking war. You have millions of people dying in this situation. So this is the context. This is a broken world order. There is no world order. Everything is up for grabs. This is where you are. Now from that broken world order, pre-industrial civilization, make it work. My point here is not to necessarily glorify what was taking place. I glorify this thing of people taking a stand and saying, I'm done. That's what I glorify. Now, from that point, you tumble into, and the same thing you've tumbled into from the standpoint of France, where you have the best of intentions. Oh God, a dictator. Oh God, a dictator. So, me glorifying the start of something is not the same thing as me saying the end result of it was perfectly okay. It's not the same thing. Freedom. I mean, I am more into this idea of I want to be left to my devices. But I don't think the Tsar was a best case scenario. I'm sorry, I don't. And I do like this idea of people pushing back against that particular system and organizing themselves, even if they fail in doing it. Even if they fail in doing it. So, no, Stalin was a brutal and murderous dictator. It was an authoritarian regime. Call it what it is. But that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that every permutation and every way in which you try to organize yourself is going to somehow end with that particular situation. I mean, let's be honest about the way we talk about it. You have capitalist societies that make that argument purely because they want to stay within bounds of the capitalist society. That's why. They're biased as fuck when they're making that argument. This is, I guess I always get annoyed in the conversations about this stuff. We glorify American history, a genocide. A genocide. We look at what was taking place there, and we look at that, and for whatever reason, we wag our finger. It's not that I'm saying that what ended up taking place was horrible. I mean, it wasn't horrible. It was. It was. And if you're asking me, would I rather live in Soviet Russia or America, I would tell you I would rather live in America, yes. I would not rather live in the Soviet regime. But the goal is not to necessarily just stay where we are. The goal is to push the bounds, move forward. Right, Stalin's right. Yeah, Stephen Carl. God damn it, I love Stephen Carl here. Stalin's rule had nothing to do with workers getting the means of production. Yes, it wasn't Marxism. It wasn't communism. It was state socialism. I know some people hate when people say that. It was state socialism. It was essentially this kind of state controlling everything. That's not workers controlling the means of production. That's not Marxism. It wasn't communism. It was not communism. That's my point. And that's his point. Russian bot. Let's conduct our affairs as if we are not immortal, please. Or maybe we should conduct our affairs as if we're immortal. I mean, think about it. If the only thing you cared about is the short span of your life, I only care about short span of my life. I'm going to get rich, die trying. And if I need to burn this shit to hell, fair enough, because I'm not going to be here in 10 years. Maybe you should think about it as if you're going to be here to inherit your fuck-ups. Stalin's rule was as authoritarian as it could get. Yeah, CCB, agreed. Agreed. Yeah, that was not a place you would want to live. That was not a place you would want to live. It's fucking terrifying. Not to mention, God, the number of people they lost in those wars. Like France was debilitated. I forget the number of people they lost in World War I. I think it was like a fourth of boys under the age of 21, or no, I'm sorry, under the age of between 21 and 40, something to that effect, some insane number. And then World War II right behind it. Oh, I love this one. Stephen Carroll. How about we conduct our affairs as Bill Hicks suggested, that we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. I love that. John Lockman. I sometimes like the dream of a unified world not decided by imaginary lines. Why not? What is the difference between states and nations? Figment of thought. This is subjectivity. All of this is subjectivity. It's so much drama. Like, I often wonder, why are these nation states in conflict with one another? And to some degree, I suppose it comes down to this thing of resources and fairness. Some people want to necessarily take more than others. If I am stronger than you, it is more fair that I get more than you. If I have to take it by force, or if you just acknowledge it and I don't punch you in the nose because of it. And so it's this complete and continuous jockeying the military might, with this idea that military might would allow you to essentially do what you want because you can always punch the other person in the nose. At some point, you get to a point where one person says, not only are you not going to punch me in the nose, I am going to punch you in the balls, and you're going to have some kind of conflict. It's utter childishness. Like as kids, it's one of those things. It's one of those behaviors that you punish your children for. Like, you're behaving like children. Grow the fuck up. And you get to this point, and I think this is the thing that Marx was getting at, where the workers will need to have somewhat of an elevated consciousness to realize that that only takes place when a small 1% has interests that runs counter to what the nation wants, and where the rest of the workers go along with it. And I use the term workers expansively because I'm talking about the 99% that make this country run. The bakers, the candlestick makers. Somebody laughed at me for saying the haberdashers, but fuck it, I'm going to say it again. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, the things that are required to make this civilization work are us. It's us. That's it. You don't need this 1%. It's irrelevant to the process. Organize yourself in a way where that becomes irrelevant. Just like kings and queens are to some degree irrelevant. I mean, think about how ridiculous it sounds when you look back and says, hey, this person, this man and woman is appointed by God. God of the universe has took time out of his, because if you're thinking this way, it has to be a his time perusing the multiverse to appoint Bob Jones as king of this particular nation. It's fucking fanciful thinking. But they used to think that way. And we kind of have the same thinking religiously about capitalism, that the capitalist is required in the process, in the same odd way that they used to think about kings and queens. The capitalist is not required to this process. There is no reason that you need to give 95% of the wealth to the top 1%. That is fucking insane. If they're getting 95% of the wealth, what the fuck are you getting? You don't have infinite resources. It needs to change. To some degree, these people said, yes, we agree with that. That is perfectly logical thinking, needs to change. How they ended up in a bad place. But I don't necessarily think their thought, and this was wrong. That doesn't necessarily mean that workers can't move in a direction that's better off in their interests without necessarily trying to topple the entirety of the democratic process. The Dark Legend. Uh-oh. It's kind of funny, Mr. Thomas. You have this great perception of the Soviet Union in the same way the white Americans think that the Confederate flag stands for Southern pride. I do not. I do not. No, I do not. Look, let me say it this way. I think it's unimpeachable. At least the point that I made prior, so I'm not going to make it again. I think that point is unimpeachable. Do I think Lenin was doing this purely for that? No. Fuck no. I think people do things for gross reasons. I think Lenin wanted power. That's what I think. That's what I think. But that being said, do I think that Lenin was at the very least had a Marxist ideology? To some degree, yes. And some degree, no. Because he did attack workers. I mean, part of the Soviet Union, the structure of it was attacking workers. So I don't, and in this odd way, and it sounds like I know I'm creating a distinction between how the revolution started versus how it ended up, is because I am. I'm creating a distinction in those things. I don't hedge at all on this thing of how this shit started. I do hedge on at the point where the shit ended up. No, I don't have this I don't have this Narnia idea of the Soviet Union. It was a brutal fucking affair. I've seen some of the film on Life Under Stalin. I don't have any illusions. Soviet Union. There is a distinction. Thank you. Hello, jerk. Thank you. I'm getting somebody backing me up. Fucking A. Now, Martian Villager, you say you wouldn't want to live under Stalin. No, I wouldn't. But I wonder where you could find a society less systemic oppression than the USSR at the time. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, but I mean, fuck, man. I mean, if you think about living under the Ukraine, under Stalin, you're talking about systemic oppression. Yeah, but they're fucking starving to death. I mean, come on. Come on, it was brutal. I mean, it was utterly brutal. If lesser of two evils isn't an argument, are we forced to prefer fantasy world? Oh God, this is a fuckfest. Snart. I am currently backing Andrew Yang, who is campaigning for president in Iowa next week. Complete media blackout on him. Unlike Bernie, they aren't even joking about Yang. Check him out. Andrew Yang. I would check Andrew Yang out. I gotta be honest. I have no idea who he is. No idea who he is. Did you know Lenin was a German agent? Yes, I did know Lenin was a German agent. Not a German agent. That's not right. I talked about this before, so I'm not going to rehash this one. I went through this one. I did go through this one. I went through this. Robert Pouquet-Ray. A pendulum push too far, eventually swinging the other way. Yes, yes, yes. Robert Pouquet-Ray. Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. Check out Burnt by the Sun. Burnt by the Sun. No, I talked about that before. I think life in the USSR was probably terrible in many ways, but why? In context, Stalin happened under the context of a worldwide capitalist sabotage against the USSR. That's the other part. Yes. Damn it. That's awesome. I'm glad you brought that up. you can't talk about a country outside of the context of other countries. Like, there's no country in the vacuum. So you have the USSR that, for the most part, is closed off against other nations because the capitalist nations are trying to crush the USSR. You know, between these other countries, the United States and Britain and the Western powers has put military in that country to try to change back the revolution to what it was, the White Army. Now, in this particular case, though, they were against the USSR. It was literally a military campaign to be against this country. NATO was against the Soviet Union. So within the context of a military thing where other countries are against you in a military capacity, meaning this, in a different world, with the USSR ended up being that way. Meaning it's Stalin, because Stalin is looking at this from the standpoint of a country that's under military siege. Like Cuba was looking at it from the standpoint of a country that was under military siege by the largest imperial power on this planet. We don't look at it that way. Like we never look at it that way. I feel you. Still, between living under the two, fuck. I feel you. Yes, there's context to that. There's always context. There's always context. I love it. And when whatever you want to say, it became a superpower. Like whatever you want to say about the Soviet system or the communist state socialist system, fuck it, I'm gonna say state socialist system. They were able to ramp up. They've had 2 brutal wars where they lost tens of millions of human beings in each of those wars. Tens of millions in the second war, several million in the first war. And they were able to ramp up their production to the point of being a superpower. Like within the course of a short span of time. I mean, that's fucking a phenomenal thing. Whatever you want to say about how brutal Stalin was. In an industrial sense. Fuck it. Fucking amazing. You may be very careful when you start a revolution. Yes, Tiberius' revolution was stolen by Julius Caesar, Lenin by Stalin. You must be careful. Yes, agreed. It's revolutions. I mean, you can look at the same thing in France. Napoleon. Bonaparte. Jamal, that is why, like co-ops, better than state socialism. Yes. It feels like it leaves people defenseless. Yes, agreed. There was also the Russo-Finnish War before World War II. This is what I mean. Like a society that was in absolute chaos, becoming the second power in the world. It's a fucking phenomenal, you know, whatever you want to call it. Whatever you want to call it. All right. I want to end this one. I think this turned out good. I went longer with my part in this. I kind of wanted to end up with more so the audience back and forth. Yeah, look at this. Elephants on Coke. I was taking a look at the average salaries in the United States. $45,000 for firefighters, $48,000 for teachers, $50,000 for cops, $12,000 for nurses. What? That can't be right. How can people live off that in cities? I have no idea. I have no idea. But they would say Jeff Bezos must have $150 billion. Oh, look at this. I love this. I love this. Why do I have? Why do I have a second Scotty? Look at this. I love this. Who did this? Who did this? I want to give credit when you guys do that. I appreciate it. Yeah, I don't know why I have 2 Scotties. There's like 2 Scotties. Okay, so there's one. Oh, why do I have another Scotty? I'll figure it out afterwards. Bastard. I think it's this. Alright. I'm going to end this. And yeah, I'm going to end this. But first, let me give credit Much love, bro. Keep up the good work. Wicked Guru, thank you. Elephants on Coke, fuck yeah, you're doing the Russian Revolution. Dan Carlin has an excellent 6-part series on World War One and 6 touches on the Russian Revolution and how the war led up to it. Yes. Harry Bothered. Oh, Harry Bothered. Thank you. This was yesterday. Drunken Chief. I think I might have went over that one. Okay, but I might have missed those, but thank you. All right, yeah, thank you guys. Robert Pouquet Ray. Thank you, Robert. You never didn't say anything on it, but thank you very much. I appreciate it. This was fucking awesome. This was awesome. I had a lot of fun with this. You know what? They want to try at the same time use this currency. This was a lot of fun. 30,000 as a master's level mental health therapist in Vegas. I'd be happy if I got full-time work. This is my point. And think about this. Would your society be better, easier? Meaning, would life for the people in the society itself, the people who make it run, the mental health workers, the mental aid workers. Think about this. You go to school, you get an education, you get off, and you start be a teacher. Why would you ever go to college to be a teacher if you're going to have $50,000 on your back as a teacher? Why? You're making $40,000 a year. Why would you get $50,000 on your back? I'm saying our society is inverted in the way that we try to go about our affairs. We as human beings run this society. We should benefit from the spoils of the society. That's my thought. Jeff Bezos will be okay with $80 billion. Jeff Bezos would do what Jeff Bezos would do with $80 billion. He would be okay. He would not be materially harmed one iota. He would not even know that he was materially harmed. We need to reorganize ourselves. That's my point. That's my point. And yeah, worker co-ops. Agreed. Agreed. Workers should own the means of production. That's not an authoritarian way at all. That's a democratic way of going about reorganization. Workers owning the means of production. That's where I am. So, guys, thank you all very much for your help for the show. You've all been nice, and you've all been nice. I guess I've said I've appreciated it. I bitch about the YouTube thing because I'm annoyed that they've done this, and there's no appeal process. There's no anything. There's no even explanation of the specifics of what it was that went wrong. So that's why I bitch about it. I don't bitch about it for the other part, but I do appreciate the help with the outpouring of support. Thank you very much. Sorry, it was 30,000. That was funny. It was 30,000. Still, that's still not a number that somebody can live off. Come on. Richest country on the planet. We've just upped the military budget. $700 billion. With a B, $700 billion. Like, do you know how much money that is? I want to write it because it's such a large fucking number. 708. I don't know if that's going to show up. It's a large share of money. That's so much wealth. All of our tax dollars being poured into this to bomb and kill and murder other people around the globe. That could be sending somebody's kid to school. That could be the next physicist, next engineer, the next person building shit. Not too much. Not too much. We can't afford to do that. All right, I'm going to end this because at this point I'm just going to start bitching. You're on Trinidad on a holiday. Enjoy your holiday, Cheryl Brandon. I'm jealous. I'm fantastically jealous. 717. God damn it. It's even worse. $717 billion. Fucking hell, man. I don't understand how, whether you're on the left or the right, you look at that number and you're aghast by that number. You're utterly aghast by it. Cryptic Warrior. No, I have to end the Cryptic Warrior because I have another show that I have at 5 o'clock. I'm going to be on the Assange thing. I'm going to be on the Vigil for Assange. It's going to be at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard. I may do one between then and now, but Money never gets to the troops. No, it doesn't. Never gets to the troops. Not to mention, do you really want your brother, uncle, cousin, niece murdering, killing, shooting, or getting killed themselves? For what? For what? What are they getting killed for? Who are the barbarians that are at our gates? There are no barbarians at our gates. We're creating barbarians. Creating our barbarians. Yeah, unity for Assange. Yeah. Can worker co-ops exist without expropriating the capitalist class? So that's the question, right? That is the question. We have a society right now where it's so weird, man. With the level of technology we have, imagine for the moment if instead of a 1% was owning, let's say, Uber or Lyft. Let's say it wasn't a 1% that was owning Uber or Lyft. Let's say it was the workers themselves that was owning Uber or Lyft. And let's say that Uber and Lyft, but see, in my head, I don't want cash to be a part of this process. Leave it up to me. But I know I'm further to the left than most people on this stuff. I want a technological society where I can go about my affairs without having intervening thing of cash and anything else. I need a car to go from point A to point B. I get on my cell phone, I click the buttons, a car is there, I get into the car, I go from point A to point B. I go about my affairs, people go about their way, they have a society. Technology does most of the work, most of the labor. There's a certain amount of labor that needs to be done. We organize ourselves in a way where there's some arrangement in the way that's done. But this idea that anybody in the society can be poor, can be broke, cannot have access to their needs, can be sleeping on the streets, is something that we just don't tolerate as a society. In the same way we don't tolerate Bob going up to Tim and shooting Tim in the face, we not tolerate somebody sleeping on the street. Why do we tolerate one but not the other? I'm saying that is somewhat of a quirk of mind. It's a quirk of how we organize ourselves, and it's a quirk of what you're willing to accept as a society. I don't quite understand why it's okay for one person to be stuck on the street, but it's not okay for one guy to shoot another person in the face. And I know that sounds odd to ask that question, but really engage the argument for the moment. Why do we accept one but not the other? And I'm saying it's a quirk of mind. It's a quirk of thought. It's one is okay, the other one is not. Okay, we don't like this. We frown upon this as a society. It rubs us the wrong way. But there are no necessarily laws that say that the state needs to make sure that people are not sleeping on the street. We don't do that. We don't do that. It's personal responsibility at that point. So it's okay if it happens. I guess I make that point to say, I understand that I'm further to the left on this point. And to me, if it's what does an end goal look like? Well, to me, that's what an end goal look like, a technological society. Are we really that far away from that level of a technological society? The only difference is that stuff is held in the hands of the 1%. So yeah, you can call for a lift. Now, you will get to the point where all of this, the calling for the lift and all of this is just automatic. You have cars that are solar powered. Those solar powered cars automatically rove around the city waiting for people to contact them on their cell phones, which again is automatic. You don't necessarily need to update it, but for the most part you update it, you tinker and everything else. You get into the car goes from point A to point B when it needs gas. If it needs gas, because again, the car at this point can be solar powered. So you can have a system that's in place that essentially is this automated system that revolves around the city itself. Hell, you can start contorting your city in a way that serves human beings. All of this is a figment of thought. What do you want your society to represent? Do you want that society to be more geared towards human beings, or do you want it geared towards profit? And I'm making a point to you that right now it is geared towards profit, which means there is no profit in the guy sleeping on the street. Sucks for him. I can't make a buck off of that guy. Can't make a buck off of him. I'm saying that's a fucked up way to go about your affairs. That's what I'm saying. We need to rethink this proposition. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. But look, from a political space, putting on the hat of just somebody who looks at what's possible in politics, I have no expectation of that taking place overnight. What I do have an expectation of, moving the ball to the left in ways that attack that particular disposition, or that tries to affect that, or at the very least gives some avenue to try to affect changes that will be in the benefit of workers in this country. That's what I look at it as. So when I look at people like Ocasio, I'll say, if she's being true, then yes, that moves the ball in that direction, because it at the very least acknowledges this issue of class, and that class is on the table for a topic of debate. Sanders, same thing. Class, it's on the topic of debate. It is the topic of debate. Women's rights, gay rights, all these things. Yes, you need identity rights. Yes. But at this point, identity rights are on the table, and it is bad form to go against those things, meaning the hegemonic viewpoint of this has shifted in the direction of the left. But economic issues have stayed stagnant in this regard. I suspect strongly because the political class has no disadvantage at all in supporting identity. I love the idea that blacks can buy my drinks. Fucking A, that's more money in my pocket. However, if you talk about this class stuff, you start talking about money in my pocket. I don't like that. I don't like that. I'm not going to put money in your pocket, politician, to talk about stuff like that. Fair enough. So what do you get? A new breed of politician that says, I'm not taking money from politicians, from these guys. These plutocratic fucks. I'm not taking their money. What I am going to do is I'm going to go for the things that you want. Not as far to the left as something that, a real socialist may go for, but definitely from the standpoint of the United States, to the left. Big, bold policy ideas from the standpoint of the United States. Fucking A, let's do it. The media decries this. But here's the catch. The media has been howling about Trump and Russia for the last 2 years. And when you look at the polling, regular human beings, Gallup or Rasmussen, the public doesn't care. They've lost legitimacy. They've lost legitimacy. The public may say, yes, there may be something to the Russia thing, meaning Russia might have had something to do with it. We don't care about it. We don't care about it. We don't care. We don't care 1,000 times. We don't care. You keep giving us this. We don't care. You guys have lost your legitimacy. Apparently the people, the Trump supporters, were angry at CNN and bashed CNN, and they were like, oh God, they're coming to get us. They're throwing down the barricades and they're coming to get us. As a newsflash, the left doesn't like the press all that much either. We agree. We agree. All right, I'm going to end this. I keep saying I'm going to end this. I'm not of mind that you can't have a peaceful world. I am of mind that political division and everything else, you can't have a peaceful world if you don't necessarily have a left that's standing up to make that work and make that case. That part of it is true. I think true. UBI is more slavery under the system. Zox, we're going to have that argument. Zox, I don't know if you were a patron, and whether you are or not, we're going to have that argument. I think we've had that argument before. But yeah, I'm going to end this. I went to culinary school, $31,000 for 7 months. Average starting pay for Gargantier, the lowest level line cook, is $10 an hour. Ouch. Ouch. Culinary school, yeah, man. He said, I'd lose. I hear you, buddy. You're confident. All right, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, guys. You all have a good one. There's going to be Julian Assange vigil on Unity for J. That's going to be at 5 o'clock. At least I'm going to be on it at 5 p.m. So hopefully I will see you guys there. Thanks, guys. And again, thank everyone for showing this. Culinary School, Robert Pouquet Ray, Wicked Guru, and Elephants on Coke, Harry Bothered, and Drunken Chief. I appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.